Hello, Dwell Church. We have a couple of things that are going on that we want to appraise you of. One, if you were here last week, you heard that we always forget when the slide comes up. We'd love for you to connect with us if you haven't. That's the QR code will get you on our email list. And part of the giving that happens here, we're just really grateful for all the people that are investing in Dwell Church financially, goes towards our partnerships in the community. And so if you're here last week, start over now. We had, I've got my slides backwards. I'm going to do this one first. If you're here last week, we talked about how with a lot of people experiencing food insecurities, with all the uncertainties with the SNAP benefits and things, we talked to George Hall and some of the families that they have at the school who could use help with groceries and things. And we talked to Latinos Unidos en Cristo, who also do a food distribution every Friday. So we're doing a gift card collection drive for groceries. We alluded to it last week. It's official. We're doing it today. We're going to, because we want to get these gift cards out to the hands of people before Thanksgiving, so to help with their Thanksgiving festivities. And so there's actually a bag in the back. A few people already jumped on the bandwagon and brought some in. So try to bring some in next week. We hope the following week we'll give them out at the school and at the Latinos Unidos ministry. So thanks for participating in that. If you can, we'd like to have $25 gift cards. You can buy one, you can buy multiple ones, but $25. And the stores that they said they shop at are Safeway, Trader Joe's, Target, and Smart and Final. Oh, going back. No, now I'm backwards into the message slides. Michelle, can you take me to the other announcement? Here we go. Nope, now I'm... well, Michelle figures that out for me after I mess it up. One thing we also talked about was how everybody builds Dwell Church. And so in an effort to really help people understand the ways that we can all get involved in doing that together, we'll be rolling out a plan to schedule everybody who calls Dwell Church home 1 week in this following year where you can be a part of our setup and tear down team. So we are completely redesigning our setup and tear down activities so that anybody can show up on a given week, and there's no prerequisites for training. We'll have other things that people are trained to do. And I think the goal for this, if everybody can step up 1 week, one, it'll help with our setup team, but two, it'll also just build some community and relationships as you begin to serve together and get to know each other. And there's no commitment after one time to continue to do setup or tear down, but if you want to, we'll add more setup team people, but hopefully this will be a doorway into thinking, how can I be a deeper part of building Dwell Church together in the many different ways that you can be invested here. So we're not doing that yet, but that's coming out in the next couple weeks. We just want to kind of keep that on your radar. Okay, so we are starting a new series, and what we're going to talk about tonight is our view of God. Our view of God. Let me start by sharing a little bit about my experience and my view of God. I didn't grow up going to church, but there was a time when I was in elementary school, I had these neighborhood boys that I was friends with. They lived across the alley behind us, Jeff, Joe, and Mark, and we would play together all the time, go to each other's houses, we'd ride our bikes together. We went to school together, and there was a point where I went to an event at their church one time. It was like a class, and I don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember the teacher passed out these little index cards, and the teacher said, write on these cards, who is God? And I also remember writing something about, well, God is a supreme being, and I think something about probably God being all-powerful or being everywhere, something like that. And he later read everybody's answers out to the class, and there was one girl named Linda, and he seemed to really like her answer. And on her note card about who is God, she wrote, our Father. And so I think that was kind of indicative for me as I became a follower of Jesus in high school. I learned about God being personal and having a relationship with Jesus. But I think when I worshiped God, my natural inclination was to think of God as just completely other, someone who's just almighty, holy, unapproachable. 1 Timothy says he lives in unapproachable light. And I think we often call God transcendent. And I think that was in my first view of God. It was rather simple, but that's the way that helped me to think about who God was, that he was almighty, awesome, all-powerful. And I think the part about God being personal and relational is something that's grown in over the past few decades. And I think as I look back, God as I have become more able to understand him and able to understand myself, my place in the world, God has revealed more and more bits of who he is over time. And my relationship with God has become understanding how complex he is, and that I will never completely comprehend who he is or have a complete correct view of God. But as some theologians say, if I could understand God completely, I'm not sure that's the kind of God I'd want to worship anyway. So knowing that God is bigger than I can understand, but slowly helping me to understand him better and better in my journey is something that's important. So this morning, I think if I can ask you, just think about, what does your view of God look like? Like, you don't have to answer this out loud or anything, or you don't have to write it on a note card, but how would you summarize who God is in your life? And maybe think about why that view of God came about. We all really, I suspect, have fairly different views of God from our experiences, from what people may have taught us, saying this is how God is, this is what the Bible says about God. From relationships, we get a view of God, especially from maybe parents or from other people. From our experiences in life, through suffering we've gone through or joyful times we've gone through, we develop a certain view of God. Perhaps even our temperament, the way we're wired, can affect how we view God. Maybe like being an optimist or being a pessimist affects how we view God. So think about that. We're going to come back to this throughout the next 20 minutes or so. And as you think about, what is your view of God? How is it shaped? And how does it affect your life? Because I think the important thing, the reason this is important to talk about, is that how we view God really affects how we live our life in this world. It affects the way we think. It affects our words. It affects our actions. And so it's important that we step back time to time and think about and evaluate our view of God. And are there things at times in our journey where we can say, this view of God just doesn't make sense to me anymore. I need to reject it, or it's not helpful, or it may even be hurtful to me or to other people around me. So I need to rethink how I think about God, because it affects me and my relationships. All right. One of the things we say at Dwell Church is it doesn't matter as much the kind of church we build, but what matters more is the kind of God we believe in. And so the kind of God that we really want to talk about at Dwell Church is a God that meets us in our deepest desires, a God who satisfies us in the most amazing ways. And so this new series, Better Than You Imagine, if it sounds familiar, when we first launched Dwell over a year ago, we did a series with this title. And we're not just repeating it. We are taking some of those concepts and we are building on them in the past year and a half that we've developed more of who we are as Dwell Church. And so we're going to be talking about how the world is better than we imagine. We're going to talk about how the gospel is better than we imagine. And today we're going to talk about how God is better than we imagine. Another thing we say at Dwell Church, we have a lot of good things we say at Dwell Church. And you slowly pick them up over time. We want to talk about a God who is worth showing up for, a God worth showing up for. So think about that. Think about the people that you would show up for. Like if you have a friend who's in the hospital, or a friend who's got a flat tire by the side of the road, or needs help moving or whatever, or a friend who's grieving, or a friend who's just gone through a bad relationship thing. Who would you show up for? And why? I think some of us may say, well, I'd show up for family. Even if it's family that you don't particularly get along with, you're just like, I'm family, so they're family, so I'll show up for them. Or people that you have a long history with, or maybe even people, you're part of a group that you made a commitment to and you show up for each other. I have a friend, his name's Bill. We met in first grade when he used to go by Willie. And we went through school together all through high school, and we've kept in touch over the years, even though we've lived in different states for most of our lives now. But I will show up for Bill. We've shown up for each other. I showed up for him when he was in the hospital with cancer. He showed up for us when we were moving. We've showed up for each other through kids and through jobs and through relationships. The most recent thing, which was pretty cool, last year, he got married for the first time at age 58. I got to show up at his wedding to officiate his wedding. And so there may be people like that in your lives, or other people you can think of. But now think about who you would show up for, and now apply that to God. What kind of God would God be for you to show up? Another way to put it what kind of God is worth just surrendering to? One way that I like to think about it is, what kind of God would I give both hands to take me? Because I think in my life, there's been often times where I've said, okay, God, here's my hand, guide me, take me along, but at the same time, my other hand is holding on to something, right? Whether it's material things or my image or comfort, whatever it is. What kind of God, though, is worth showing up for, where you can give him both hands and trust him that he's got your back, that he loves you, he's going to take care of you? Another thing you've probably heard at Dwell, if you've been here for a while, is this quote from Dallas Willard. This is not out of the Bible, but I really believe the things that Dallas says in this quote is they reflect biblical principles and concepts in the Bible. So the philosopher Dallas Willard says, "To Jesus' eyes, this is a God-bathed and God-permeated world. It is a world filled with a glorious reality. It's a world that is inconceivably beautiful and good because of God and because God is always in it. It's a world in which God is continually at play and over which he constantly rejoices. Until our thoughts of God have found every visible thing and event glorious with his presence, the word of Jesus has not yet fully seized us." I spent some time thinking about this quote this week, and I think it's just amazing. The world is inconceivably beautiful because God is playing, and he's playing in the world. There's joy in being involved in the world. He constantly rejoices. And every visible thing and event may be glorious with his presence, but how often do we miss that? We're gonna talk about that a little bit here. Because when we talk about God like this, another thing we say at Dwell is we hope that even people who don't believe God will say, "I hope that's true." If that's the God that we worship, are people around us going to say, "I hope that's true, even if I don't believe in that God? It sounds like a good thing. It sounds like something that I want, or something that I want to explore." So we're not going to try to, think about your view of God. Does that align with the Dallas Willard quote? Do you think of God as at play in the world, where the world is filled with God's glory and his beauty? We're not going to try to comprehensively reshape anybody's view of God tonight. What we're going to do is just kind of I figure it's better to tackle one thing at a time. We're going to talk about beauty as an essential characteristic of God. Because I think the more we understand the beauty of God, the more that we are able to reflect that into the world, which is a part of God's purposes for being in the world and being rejoicing over it and helping us to flourish. Okay. So what do you think of when you think of the word beauty? Go ahead and shout out. Word association: beauty. Nature. Okay. Nice. Anything else? Art. Makeup. Nice. The cosmetic industry is big. Not as big as God, but big. Anything else? Anything else? I think my mind would normally goes toward things that are tangible and visible, like art, like nature. But other things can be beautiful too, like music can be beautiful. It can move us in different ways, right? Tastes, like food, can be beautiful. If you've seen the movie Babette's Feast, I think that's an example of how food can be beautiful. Scent can be beautiful, or just seeing someone do an act of kindness or something that's really loving can be described as beautiful, right? Going to look at Psalm 27, where it says, "One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple." So the word translated beauty in our English Bibles here is the Hebrew word noam. And that word noam also is used to designate something that's pleasant, something that's delightful, something that's refreshing. So going back to your view of God, you usually associate God with something that's pleasant or delightful, or God as refreshing. There's another verse, one of my favorite verses of Psalms again, in Psalm 36. Talk about how we can feast on the abundance of your house, God's house, that God gives us drink from his river of delights. And this whole concept of a river of delights is just, I don't know, I love it. It's just like bottomless drinks and just like a river of delights, things that are delightful. And I think that reflects this whole concept of the word, I will dwell in the house of the Lord and behold his beauty. His beauty is refreshing, it's delightful. Now, the word beauty doesn't actually appear in many of our English translations very often, at least with regard to who God is. So it's interesting, if you remember a couple months ago, we were looking at the First Nations version of the Bible, and there's a copy right there. And when in the First Nations version of the Bible, a lot of times where the other English translations use the word glory, the First Nations version uses beauty. So I think it's interesting. We're going to look at a couple of those to help us understand a little bit more of this concept of beauty as one of God's essential characteristics. Because I think we've talked about is when you read the Bible, one of the things that are important for us to turn the gem, so to look at the different facets of the Bible from different perspectives so that we can have a greater understanding of how the Bible is written, who is written for, and how does it apply to us today. So in the First Nations version, in John 17:5, it says, "The beauty I shared at your side before you created all things." This is Jesus talking to God the Father. And he's talking about the beauty that existed before all of creation, beauty that was from eternity before us to eternity afterwards. It's an eternal beauty, and Jesus shared in that beauty. He refers to that here in John 17:5. The Greek word that's translated beauty and also glory in our other translations is the word doxa. That's where we get the word doxology that we'll be singing at the end of this message. And so doxa is also something that it's used to indicate honor, and it's also used to indicate brightness, or it's like, bright light. So another example from Revelation 21:11. Speaking of, this is when God returns to restore all things into the rightness of creation. And this is describing the New Jerusalem, the city where all of creation will dwell in God's complete presence, unadulterated presence, beholding the beauty of God. It says, "It was filled with Creator's beauty and honor. The sacred village was bright and shone like a costly stone, like a jasper stone as clear as crystal." So I think this reflects clarity of God's beauty beyond our imagination that we can look forward to when God puts all things right again. One more. Doxa also evokes a sense of bringing a good opinion of something or helping something to have a good reputation. So in John 12:28 in the First Nations version again, "Father," he prayed, "honor your name and show the world the beauty of it." So, and I think more so than today, people's names back then really reflected their character. And so this verse gives a sense of how Jesus asked for the Father to honor his name, and that the world may be reflected in the world, that the world will have a good opinion, that your reputation will be great among the people of the world. And that's part of the beauty. So the takeaway from this is that God gives us glimpses of his beauty and glory. If you think about Moses, so if you're familiar with the story of Moses in Exodus 34, he goes up onto the mountain to meet with God, and he comes back with a shining face just because he's been in God's presence and he's absorbed the radiance of God, and he comes back down to the people and his face is shining. And I think as you move forward, God's presence was limited to the Israelites. Only the priest could go into the holy part of the temple where God's presence dwelled, and there was a curtain that separated it from the people. After Jesus' death and resurrection, the curtain was torn, and now we all have access to the immediate presence of God, to behold his beauty. But sometimes, if you're like me, it just feels like that curtain is really thick, and it's really hard to access the presence of God and to see him in our lives. So before we talk about what the ultimate takeaway is, let's just identify some of the things. What are the things that kind of cloud our vision of God so that we don't get to see the fullness of his beauty? My wife Angela and I were in San Luis Obispo last week visiting our daughter at Cal Poly, and we're like, "Oh, the ocean! We love the ocean and the beach. It's beautiful. We're gonna stay at a hotel by the beach." So we get there, and the whole time we're there, it's cloudy, it's foggy, it's raining, it's cold and wet. So all this fog kept us from seeing the beauty of the ocean until the day we left, and then everything cleared up. Obviously, of course. So there are things in our lives that I think cloud our vision, so we have trouble seeing God when he wants to reveal himself to us. And I think some of those things include when things we trust in rather than trusting God, we might call them idols. When we try to do things to elevate our own honor and glory, our own doxa over God's. When we're more concerned with our reputation or our image rather than honoring God, the beauty of God's name, those things cloud our image of God, so it's harder for us to see him when he wants to reveal himself to us. When we find our value in things other than God, when we place our identity in things other than God, those things cloud our vision, so we have a harder time seeing the beauty and the glory of God, which is in the world around us. We just often missed it. So how do we clear this up? How do we clear our vision? How do we get prescription glasses that really help us to see God more clearly? I'm going to give us 5 things that will help us hopefully swim against the tide that causes us to, that keeps us from having a full view of God. But again, it starts with going back to our own honest evaluation of what is our view of God like now? How does it affect our life? How does it perhaps need to change, or how do we need to transform it? If you have a view of God that sees God as just a stern disciplinarian, then the experiences that brought you to that are very valid. But I would also suggest that that's an incomplete view of God, that God is much more than that. Or perhaps you might have a view of God who might be big and almighty, but he's not involved, or he's uncaring, or like he's not listening. I had a long period of time where I just felt like God was not present in my life. It's not like I didn't believe in him, but that view of God is also very valid, but incomplete again. And I think I would love to see us just pursue a fuller view of who God is in all of his beauty and his glory. And so some of the ways we could potentially do this. First one, identify those clouds that blur our vision. So what are those clouds in your life that you may be putting your identity in, those things you might be trusting in, those things that get in the way of seeing God fully? Or what are those negative things, experiences that you've experienced that distort your view of God? And you just carry those with you, and they are not helpful. They're not helpful to you. They're not helpful to the world around you. These are things that we need to bring before God, pray that God can redeem them, bring people, trusted advisors in your life, close friends that you can talk to about it, and pray that you can be freed from those barriers that keep us from seeing God clearly. Perhaps even therapy can be a way that you can identify those things and begin to let go of them. So identify clouds, notice beauty. So this is where I think the whole idea of stopping and smelling the roses, the cliche, I think is very applicable. And so there's 2 ways to, I think, change our vision that I think can be helpful. I think we can expand our vision. So when we're going about our everyday tasks and things we're focused on, it can be helpful just to step back and look around. Even if you're just outside, like look up, or if you're at your desk in your computer, like stop and look around and see what's going on, and take notice of some of the things that God may want to show you, that we lose, that we never get to see if we're just focused with our heads in our phones, or we're just focused on one thing, right? So we could expand our vision, but we can also narrow our vision on the other side. So I think sometimes it's helpful just to focus on some little things that you might normally miss out on, like the little flower growing out of the crack in the sidewalk. I think photographers are really good at this, right? They're used to looking at things through the lens of a camera and framing things. It helps you focus when you narrow your vision as well. So just ideas to help to see things in a new way. Going back to Moses real quick, in Exodus 33, he asked God to show him his glory, and God, in his mercy, says, no one can see my face and live. Because humans, I think we would just be obliterated by God's glory if we just showed up and said, in your face, here I am, and it would just be too much for us to absorb, right? So in his mercy, he says to Moses, he says, I'm going to put you in a cleft in the rock. I'm going to put my hand over you, and as I go by, you can look at my back. And that was Moses could handle. So I think since we can't handle the fullness of God, I think God in his mercy, he kind of seeps into our lives. And but that means we have to look. We have to look in these little interstitial spaces where there's intersection of heaven and earth. If we're going to pay attention and notice God saying, here I am, look at the beauty and glory with which I want to bless you with, and with which I want you to bring into the world as well. Okay, so identify clouds, notice beauty, follow beauty. So a lot of times social media gets really a bad rap for being really distracting, but if you can find people that post beautiful things, so find a photographer you really like, or an artist, a dancer, a chef, and as you scroll and you observe things that are of beauty, that give you a glimpse into eternity, then that can help shift our perspective rather than whatever all kinds of bad videos come to my mind, dancing cat videos, whatever you guys watch when you're scrolling. Notice beauty, follow beauty, and I didn't misspell this. There's a spiritual practice called the prayer of examen. This is Latin. And so if you're not familiar with that, it's really taking time on a regular basis to sit back. A lot of times people will say for the past 24 hours, go through your day, each hour, go backwards, and think about where did you notice God in your day? Or where did you not? Where did you feel like you connected with God or you saw God in your day? Go back. And you may be really discouraged the first time you try this because you'll be like, in the past 24 hours, I totally just didn't even think about God. But the whole point is that you develop this muscle of noticing. And then as you begin to notice more, as you think back through your days, where God showed up, where you missed it, where you caught it, and then your prescription for your glasses starts to sharpen a little bit, and you get to notice some of the things that God wants you to notice. And then the last one, there's this pastor author that has inspired me a lot. Her name is Barbara Brown Taylor. And she posted about this prayer. So it's 4 words a couple weeks ago, and I've been using it. It says, Lord, increase my bewilderment. Lord, increase my bewilderment. And so I really appreciate this prayer because it kind of takes me out of my just like getting things done focused or like me focus and saying, all right, God, just bewilder me a little. I want to kind of be in awe of something and just kind of step out of my normal mode of thinking, my mode of earthly, worldly thinking, human thinking, and just be amazed by something. And I think God will bless that prayer if you just look for more bewilderment in your life. So I'm going to wrap up with this one quote. There's an artist named Scott Erickson. And for some context of it, I just noticed there's 6 bullet points, but there's only 5 things. I'm not sure why that is. Distraction. So Scott Erickson is talking about how the internet, we can get sucked into this whole, there's all these horrible things happening. There's nothing that we can do in our small little world to really make a difference. So, and this is what he says, though. He says, the internet focuses on awful things that I can do nothing about. But what have I been given to uniquely love and help flourish into the world? What do I find uniquely beautiful? Because beauty is not in the categories of right or good. It's in the category of love, which is the thread that weaves through every human life, every civilization, every time and place on this planet, emerging from the great mystery we call God. You must find this thread in your life. You must pull the thread to see where it leads you. The real loss in obeying the internet machine is that it will ask you to give up what you can uniquely love and help flourish in the world, because it always has an argument on how what you're doing doesn't matter in the face of huge, awful things. The point isn't that you need to be an artist to bring beauty into the world. The point is that we all have this thread that we can pull, that God, that takes us to a place where we experience more of God's glory and more of God's beauty. And from that place, we can bring that out into the world in our own unique way that God has equipped us to do, to help with the flourishing of God's kingdom as is built here on earth, the way that he wants us to be involved in that. So let me pray for us. God, thank you that you want us to know you and you reveal yourself to us in many ways, in ways that we often miss. So, Lord, I pray that you will help us to identify and put aside those things that keep us from seeing you more clearly. And as we do see you more clearly, may we reflect your beauty and your glory into the world where you have placed us. In Jesus' name, amen.